Greetings, fellow YouTuber. My name is Tim. 5 words. 5 words that was heard by a 6-year-old boy that literally set the path for his entire life's vocation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
That transformative moment in 1964 when I got to see the Beatles for the first time on The Ed Sullivan Show. Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and John Lennon descended upon America for the first time and set about their path to change not just music, but Western culture as a whole in the 20th century. Fast forward almost 60 years, and now we're getting talk of the final Beatles recording, the final record in which John, Paul, George, and Ringo all performed together. Great news, to be sure. But should the closure be complete? Should there also be a final Beatles album? Don't get ahead of me. Let's just talk about it. Okay, look, I'm not going to start by boring you with another lecture about how important the Beatles were in terms of music and fashion and recording and technique and all that. There's plenty of other YouTube videos out there and you can go find them out for yourself. But it is important that we touch upon the origins of this new final recording that's due out later in 2023, where it came from, and even what it might be. In 1994, the music industry was set ablaze when it was rumored that the surviving members of the Beatles, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, were recording incidental music for a special that turned out to be the Anthology series, a 3-album set and accompanying video that was released in 1995 and 1996. During the recording of this, Yoko Ono, John Lennon's widow, gave the band a series of cassettes. These cassettes contained demos that was recorded by John Lennon in his New York apartment somewhere between 1977 and 1979. Enlisting the help of George's friend, fellow traveling Wilbury, and former ELO frontman Jeff Lynne, the surviving Beatles set about the task of using those cassettes to create what would be the first Beatles song in 25 years, Free as a Bird, which appeared on Anthology 1. Later, the world was treated to a second track, Real Love, which appeared on Anthology 2. So you can imagine the anticipation when Anthology 3 was released in 1996. However, there was no new Beatles track. Paul McCartney explained in a recent interview.
There were 3 that we liked, Free as a Bird, Real Love. And so those were the 2 that we did. And there was another one that we started working on, but George went off it. Fucking hell. Fucking rubbish, this is. It was like, no, George, this is John. It's still fucking rubbish, you know. Oh, okay, then.
Now, it's important to know that history for 2 reasons. Number 1, that was the last time that George Harrison recorded with Paul and Ringo. Remember, he passed away from cancer in 2001. And number 2, the most ominous of all, is in that same interview, Paul admits
that one's still lingering around somewhere. I'm going to nick in with Jeff and do it, finish it one of these days.
So it's a pretty safe bet that the final Beatles recording will be John Lennon's Now and Then, a demo that he wrote at home in 1979. The track will be produced by Jeff Lynne because he started it during the Anthology sessions, but he'll be joined by Giles Martin, son of the late Sir George Martin, who worked on all the Beatles tracks throughout their career. He also engineered, along with Sam Okell, the reissue anniversary editions of Sgt. Pepper, Let It Be, and Abbey Road.
The 23.
Okay, so we figured out what the song is going to be, but let's talk about completing the cycle. Let's talk about really putting a proper end and proper closure to the Beatles legend. How about a final Beatles album to have it included on? There's a few ways that this could go. One of them is to have an Anthology 4. 4 albums, 4 Beatles. Only makes sense, right? The problem with this is maybe Apple is starting to run out of stuff to release from the vaults. I mean, unless you're really down with getting the bass drum track to Ticket to Ride, really, does that make a lot of sense? Another variation and a rumor that I've been hearing is that Apple may be planning on revamping the Red and the Blue album, turning it from a 2-album set to a 3-album set, expanding it and including Now and Then on the Blue Album. But really, does that make a lot of sense? I mean, the Blue Album's only supposed to go to 1970. How about this idea, though? How about a completely revamped version of the Past Masters album? The compilation that was released originally in 1988 that contained all of the Beatles singles. This way you could put all 3 of the anthology singles on that compilation. Free as a Bird, Real Love, and Now and Then. The perfect compilation to put the perfect closure on the legend of this band. Regardless of how it's packaged, we know 2 things for sure. Number 1, it'll be out by the end of 2023. And number 2, we know that this will be the final etching into the catalog of the Beatles' recorded works. As a fan who has enjoyed them my entire life, I welcome this. I have had a lifetime of enjoyment, not to mention influence. The fact is, had I not seen them that night in February of '64, I would not have chosen a life in music. I would have not chosen a life in radio to enjoy music and present music. The Beatles have been everything to me, as I'm sure they have been to you. And I, for one, welcome the fact that Paul and Ringo can finally enjoy their autumn years. They're in their 80s, after all. They can look back now and enjoy the fruits of their labors. I will not say goodbye, but to the Beatles, from that 6-year-old kid that sat on the piano bench in his house on Levitt Street that night in 1964 and watched you change history in real time, thank you. Hail and farewell.
I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition.